Our story begins in Iowa, 1939.
Picture this, an orphanage on the outskirts of Davenport. Inside, there are 22 children. Every single one of them is an orphan. That means no parents. And, maybe most importantly, no one coming to check on them.
Now, this specific place wasn't chosen by accident. It was picked out very deliberately by a scientist named Wendell Johnson. And at the time, he was one of America's most celebrated speech therapists. He didn't pick these kids because they had some kind of problem. He picked them because he knew that if something went terribly, terribly wrong, nobody would complain.
And what he did next? Well, it was so disturbing that his own team ended up giving it a name. They called it the Monster Study. And think about that for a second. This wasn't a name given by critics or outsiders. This came from the people inside the lab. So in this explainer, what we're going to do is break down the 6 dark psychology mechanisms that this single experiment exposed. And we're going to show you how they're still being used right now, today. I want you to pay really close attention when we get to sign number 5, because that one, it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like it's coming from someone who loves you.
All right, let's dive in. The first mechanism, it all starts with the power and manipulation of language. Imagine this. A researcher, a figure of authority, looks at a perfectly healthy child and says with complete, unwavering confidence, "You have a stuttering problem." And just like that, the child believed it. Why? It wasn't because of any evidence. It was simply because the person saying it looked like someone who knew what they were talking about. You know, there's a name for this. The psychologist Robert Cialdini calls it authority bias. It means we're basically hardwired to accept information from people who project expertise. We often don't even stop to question whether they're using that expertise honestly. And here's the chilling part. The most dangerous people in your life usually aren't strangers. They're the people whose authority you accepted a long, long time ago, before they ever decided to use it against you. Okay, so the second tactic was brutally simple. It was all about repetition. Session after session, they told the children the exact same thing. You are stuttering. There it is again, over and over. And soon enough, kids who had perfectly normal speech started to hesitate, then they'd stumble over their words, and then many just went silent. You see, the repetition didn't reveal a problem, it created one. Neuroscientists actually have a term for this. It's called the illusory truth effect. It's this idea that when a lie is repeated enough, our brains start to accept it as true. And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many things do you believe about yourself right now? Not because they're actually true, but just because someone told them to you over and over again until they started to feel like the truth. This is the point where the psychological cage really starts to form. Because once those children truly believed they couldn't speak properly, they just stopped trying. They'd be in the middle of a sentence, and they would just freeze. Some of them stopped talking completely. They had been taught that trying was pointless, that failure was a guarantee. The psychologist Martin Seligman gave this a name too. He called it learned helplessness, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You stop trying, not because you actually can't succeed, but because you've been conditioned to believe the outcome is already set in stone. And just remember, these were healthy kids. This didn't take years. It took just a few weeks. The moment someone convinces you that you're broken, and they repeat that message long enough, you give up. Not because you are broken, but because you've been taught to believe it. Now, if any of this is starting to feel a little too familiar, that feeling is important. It's a signal telling you to pay attention. Go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications because signs 4 and 5, these are the ones that are the hardest to spot in your own life. And frankly, they're the ones most people never fully recover from. All right, now we're moving into the tactics that are designed to completely erase a person's sense of self. And it all begins with isolation. Remember how Johnson chose orphans? That was 100% deliberate. He needed children who had no parents around to notice the disturbing changes. No family to start asking questions, and no one with the power to pull them out when things went way too far. Their vulnerability wasn't just a side note, it was the entire point of the setup. Criminologist Evan Stark has studied this extensively, and he identified isolation as the foundational move in almost all psychological manipulation. Think about it. Before you can distort someone's reality, you have to cut them off from the people who could help them see the truth. But here's the really insidious part. It's never presented as isolation. No, it's framed as closeness. It sounds like it's you and me against the world, or I'm the only one who truly understands you.
So once a person is isolated, the stage is set for the final attack. And this is identity destruction. You see, this experiment went so much deeper than just changing what the children did. It completely changed who they believed they were. They went from thinking, I'm struggling with speaking right now, which is a temporary state, to thinking, I am a stutterer. This is just who I am. And research from Jennifer Freyd shows that this is the deepest kind of damage possible. Why? Because our identity is the lens we use to see and interpret everything. When you shatter that lens, the damage doesn't just stop when the abuse stops. In fact, decades later, when some of those children were found as elderly adults, they confirmed the effects were permanent. For them, it wasn't just a bad memory. It was a fundamental change to the person they became.
So what about the man behind all of this? While this horrific study was going on, what was Wendell Johnson doing? He was publishing papers. He was receiving awards. He actually built this celebrated public career helping people with speech disorders, all while he was secretly creating that exact condition in helpless children. And the monster study? It stayed buried for 60 years. Not because it was actively hidden, but because Dr. Johnson was just so respected that nobody ever thought to look. This fits a pattern that psychopathy expert Robert Hare found over and over in his work. The most dangerous people are almost never the ones who seem obviously threatening. No, they're the ones who come across as warm and trustworthy, the kind of person everyone speaks highly of. He calls this the mask of trustworthiness. So the real question you should ask yourself is never whether someone seems like a good person. It's whether their actions over time consistently match the person they claim to be. So let's just quickly recap the 6 tactics we've walked through. We had authority bias, repetition as reality, manufactured helplessness, deliberate isolation, identity destruction, and finally the respectable face of evil. And I want to be really clear about this. These are not just dusty old tactics from 1939. These mechanisms are being used right now, today, in relationships, within families, and in workplaces that probably look completely normal from the outside. They called it the monster study for a reason, right? But the true lesson here isn't just about one monster. It's about the conditions that allow a monster to exist in the first place. It's about how ordinary people can do monstrous things when good people around them simply decide not to look. So the message is simple. Don't stop looking. Make sure you subscribe for more explainers just like this one that decode the human mind. And before you go, drop a comment below and let us know which of these mechanisms you recognize the most. Because remember, naming the pattern is always the very first step to breaking it.